The Great Wall of China has always stood as a monument to human ambition, a ribbon of stone and earth stretching over 20,000 kilometers across mountains, deserts, and plains, built by generations who believed they could command the landscape itself. To most of the world, it is a symbol of defense, power, and endurance. But to the archaeologists who have spent their lives digging beneath its shadow, it is something far more haunting, a wall not just of stone, but of silence. For decades, the question has lingered: what lies buried beneath the wall? What stories? What blood? What civilizations vanished long before the first brick was laid? The answers, as it turns out, would make even the most seasoned scientists tremble, because the Great Wall, far from being the beginning of Chinese history, may instead conceal the end of something far older. It began with what seemed like a routine excavation. In 2011, a team of Chinese archaeologists was surveying a remote section of the wall near the Ordos Plateau, an arid, windswept region where the Gobi Desert meets the yellow grasslands of Inner Mongolia. Their task was simple: to document the eroded remains of a watchtower. But as they cleared the sand, their instruments began to detect a pattern, an anomaly deep beneath the soil, perfectly geometric, aligned with magnetic north. At first, they assumed it was a foundation, the base of an earlier fortification. But when they dug deeper, they found something they couldn't explain. Blocks of carved limestone, polished to a mirror finish, interlocked without mortar, and forming a subterranean structure unlike anything in Chinese architecture. There were no inscriptions, no relics, no tools. Just silence and the feeling that whatever they had found was not meant to be unearthed. The deeper they dug, the stranger it became. At a depth of 9 meters, they uncovered a narrow tunnel sealed with clay bricks. When they broke through, the air that escaped was cold, dry, and ancient. The passage led into a chamber so perfectly cut that its walls still shimmered with traces of mica and quartz dust. But what truly shocked the team was what lay inside: a circle of 12 skeletons, all arranged with their heads facing inward toward a central stone altar. The bones were not those of soldiers or peasants. They were delicate, refined, and bore traces of ornamental jade bracelets and hairpins. Whoever these people were, they had been placed there deliberately, and the way they died sent chills through the entire camp. Each skull bore a single, clean fracture, as if struck by the same blunt instrument in ritual unison. Around them lay shattered vessels of blackened clay and thin layers of ash, suggesting fire, offering, or perhaps something darker. The site was sealed immediately. It was classified as a Neolithic sacrificial pit. But among the researchers, a rumor began to spread that this chamber predated the earliest dynasties of China by thousands of years, perhaps belonging to a civilization lost to time. Their suspicion grew stronger when, a few months later, another discovery was made, this time 200 kilometers southwest, in the ruins of Shimao, an ancient walled city so vast and sophisticated that it should not have existed in its time. Shimao was built over 4,000 years ago, long before the unification of China, long before the emperors, and even before the written word. Its walls stretched for more than 10 kilometers, its palaces adorned with carved jade, gold, and bone, its layout precise and mathematical. Yet what haunted archaeologists most was not its beauty, but its cruelty. Around the city's main gate, they found hundreds of human skulls, buried in neat layers beneath the stone. DNA analysis revealed that many of them belonged to women and children sacrificed, it seemed, to sanctify the foundation of the city itself. Their skulls were arranged facing outward, as if to watch over the walls for eternity. The same ritual death and defense of stone now seemed to echo beneath the Great Wall itself. Archaeologists began to wonder whether the wall, that colossal symbol of protection, had inherited not just the stones, but the spirit of those ancient sacrifices. Was it possible that the builders of the wall, unknowingly or not, had erected it on top of a much older civilization, one that had already mastered fortification, astronomy, and engineering millennia before the Qin dynasty? The evidence was unsettling. Beneath several stretches of the wall, especially near Ningxia and Inner Mongolia, researchers found remnants of older structures' walls built not of brick, but of enormous stone blocks, similar to those of Shimao. Some had weathered carvings of serpent-like figures, eyes, and geometric symbols that bore no resemblance to Chinese writing. One of these carvings, found near the Yinshan Mountains, depicts a coiled creature surrounded by flames, a symbol identical to motifs later used to represent the dragon, China's most sacred mythological figure. But this carving predates any known depiction of the dragon by at least 3,000 years. It suggests that the dragon, long considered a divine symbol of imperial power, may have originated not from myth, but from memory. The more the archaeologists uncovered, the more the ground itself seemed to resist them. Every excavation revealed layers of destruction, fire, collapse, then silence. The ruins told a story of catastrophe repeated again and again, as if each civilization built its walls only to fall to the same mysterious force. That force, it seemed, was not always human. In 2015, a geological team analyzing soil samples beneath one of these ancient layers found traces of iridium, a rare element often associated with meteorite impacts. Beneath the wall's westernmost foundations, the sediment contained microscopic glass spherules, the byproducts of intense heat, far beyond anything ancient furnaces could produce. It was as though part of the region had once been scorched from the sky. The find forced historians to reconsider the origins of China's northern myths, the stories of fire from heaven, dragons that fell to earth, and walls of flame that devoured kingdoms. What if these legends weren't metaphors, but distant recollections of a cataclysm that destroyed an earlier civilization? At this point, the research turned from archaeological to existential. Because if Shimao was real, and if these subterranean structures beneath the Great Wall were connected to it, then the wall we see today might not be a creation of the Qin dynasty at all, but a reconstruction, a restoration of an older boundary built by a forgotten people. And if that is true, then the Great Wall is not simply a line dividing China from its enemies. It is a scar marking the edge of a lost world. To test this theory, archaeologists began searching for structural connections between the two. They found them not in documents, but in stone. The wall's earliest sections, built of rammed earth and crushed gravel, followed a specific orientation, one that matched the astronomical alignments of Shimao's gates and towers. Both structures pointed toward the same constellation, Orion. In ancient Chinese cosmology, Orion was associated with warriors and sacrifice, but in Sumerian and Egyptian traditions, it was linked to resurrection and divine judgment. The same star pattern, replicated in both east and west at roughly the same time, hinted at a shared memory, or perhaps a shared trauma. As one archaeologist put it, it is as if the people who built these walls were not protecting themselves from others, they were protecting the world from something that had already happened once before. And so the Great Wall, long celebrated as the pinnacle of human endurance, suddenly appeared as something else entirely, a monument of fear. A few researchers even began to whisper a new theory, one considered too dangerous to publish, that the wall's true purpose was never purely military. Its vastness, its alignment with magnetic ley lines, and its integration with rivers and mountains suggested something far larger, a boundary designed not to keep invaders out, but to contain something within. The idea was dismissed publicly, of course, but behind closed doors, teams of specialists from multiple institutions continued to analyze the data, tracing the wall's underground extensions, its buried chambers, and the strange, symmetrical patterns of its foundations. Then, in late 2019, they found something that changed everything. A buried tunnel perfectly round, extending from beneath the wall toward the ruins of Shimao. It was sealed by layers of fused stone, as if melted shut, and inside that tunnel, their sensors detected something pulsing faint but rhythmic, like a slow mechanical heartbeat. When they broke through, the air that escaped was not ancient and dry, but warm, as if the earth beneath the Great Wall had never truly gone cold. When the sealed tunnel was first discovered beneath the Great Wall in 2019, no one truly grasped what they were about to uncover. At first glance, it looked like a simple cavity, a relic of ancient construction, or perhaps an unfinished escape passage. But the readings told a different story. The thermal sensors picked up irregular heat patterns, the kind generated not by geological activity, but by a controlled, sustained energy source. And there was that faint, rhythmic vibration pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the earth. The team hesitated. Breaking into a sealed chamber was risky. Pressure differences could cause collapse, and the site's historical importance made every move critical. Still, curiosity overruled caution. After several weeks of preparation, the archaeologists drilled a narrow borehole through the fused layer of rock. What they expected to find was empty space or compacted soil. What emerged instead was warm air, heavy, metallic, and almost electric to the touch, as though charged with static. Instruments registered traces of ozone and ionized particles, readings consistent with lightning strikes or high-energy discharges. Inside the tunnel, the walls were unlike anything the team had seen. They were smooth, fused into a glass-like surface that reflected the faint glow of their lamps. The passageway descended at a steady angle for nearly 60 meters before leveling into a vast circular chamber. The air shimmered slightly, and a low hum seemed to emanate from the stone itself. At the center of that chamber stood a massive object, a perfect cylinder of black basalt, carved with lines so fine they looked etched by light. Around it, 12 stone pillars formed a circle, each engraved with symbols no one could identify. The carvings were geometric and repetitive, spirals and lattices intertwined like circuitry, pulsing with a strange symmetry that felt deliberate, almost alive. One of the younger researchers, a linguist named Wei Lin, suggested that the markings resembled ancient proto-writing found in the ruins of Shimao, but far more complex, as if evolved from the same system over thousands of years. Others disagreed, arguing that the precision of the engravings implied advanced tools. But the truth was more unsettling. No tool marks were visible at all. It was as if the stone had been shaped from within, molded by heat or pressure far beyond the capability of Bronze Age technology. When the team attempted to photograph the carvings, their equipment began to fail. Batteries drained instantly, and data files became corrupted. Even analog film, brought as backup, showed streaks of light and distortion, as though the camera lens had been exposed to radiation. The readings from their dosimeters remained low, well below danger levels, yet several team members reported headaches, disorientation, and an overwhelming sense of vertigo while inside the chamber. Despite these warnings, the lead archaeologist, Professor Zhang Chen, insisted on continuing. For her, this was the find of a lifetime proof that an unknown civilization had once thrived beneath the foundations of China's oldest structures. She was determined to document every detail. But the deeper they investigated, the more inexplicable the sight became. When they examined the basalt cylinder at the center of the chamber, they noticed that it wasn't entirely solid. It emitted a faint, almost magnetic pull, strong enough to interfere with compasses. The surface temperature was slightly warmer than the surrounding air, and when Zhang placed her palm against it, she felt an irregular vibration, not constant, but rhythmic, like something dormant but alive. As the team measured its dimensions, they realized that the object's proportions matched a precise mathematical ratio, the same phi ratio that appears in the Great Pyramid of Giza, in Stonehenge, and in countless sacred sites around the world. That discovery sent shockwaves through the group. How could civilizations separated by continents and millennia share identical architectural codes? To answer that question, Zhang reached out to her colleague, Dr. Elias Kovacs, a Hungarian archaeophysicist known for his research on resonance patterns in ancient architecture. Kovacs flew to China with specialized instruments capable of measuring electromagnetic frequencies within stone. When he entered the chamber, he immediately noticed that the air carried a subtle vibration, inaudible, but physically felt. He called it the hum of the earth. When the cylinder was scanned, the results defied logic. The object emitted a steady frequency of 18.3 Hz, the same low infrasound range known to cause anxiety, dizziness, and hallucinations in humans. More astonishingly, the frequency pulsed in perfect harmony with the magnetic orientation of the Great Wall's entire length. This meant that the wall, stretching thousands of kilometers across the landscape, was not merely a defensive structure. It was part of a vast resonant network, channeling the Earth's natural energy lines through points like this hidden chamber. In other words, the wall itself might have been constructed along pre-existing energy pathways known to ancient builders, what modern science now calls telluric currents. Kovacs was fascinated but disturbed. If this network was intentional, he said. "Then whoever built it understood the planet better than we do." That night, as the team reviewed their findings, one of the engineers monitoring seismic sensors noticed something impossible. Faint tremors echoing through the chamber, perfectly synchronized with the vibrations of the basalt cylinder. Every time the pulse intensified, the reading spiked slightly, suggesting a transfer of energy between the object and the Earth itself. For several days, the pulses continued. Then, without warning, they stopped. At sunrise, when the archaeologists returned to the chamber, the air felt different, colder, heavier, and utterly still. The humming had vanished. But when they approached the cylinder, they found fresh markings on its surface. The new lines formed a pattern resembling an eye surrounded by concentric circles, identical to symbols found in Neolithic carvings thousands of kilometers away, in Siberia and even Europe. It was as though the stone had awakened long enough to mark itself. The discovery spread through academic circles quietly, shared only among a few trusted colleagues. No official announcement was made. The Chinese government sealed the site, declaring it a protected zone under military supervision. Within weeks, the entire area was fenced off. Still, fragments of the research leaked online photographs, sound recordings, and partial data from the resonance scans. Independent analysts confirmed that the frequency recorded inside the chamber matched the oscillation period of the Earth's ionosphere, the same global electromagnetic rhythm that governs thunderstorms and auroras. To some, it was proof that the ancients had built a planetary energy grid. To others, it was evidence of something far stranger, that the builders of Shimao and the Great Wall were not merely human, or at least not entirely alone. Meanwhile, Zhang's team, disbanded but restless, continued their work in secret. They compared the carvings from the chamber to symbols found in other ancient sites across Asia. The Longyu Caves in Zhejiang, the Mausoleum of the Yellow Emperor in Shaanxi, and even megalithic tombs in Korea and Japan. To their astonishment, they found repeating motifs, spirals, concentric rings, and interlocking triangles, as if these civilizations had shared a single, ancient language long before history began. But then came the discovery that made even Zhang question everything she believed. Satellite imagery revealed faint geometric patterns surrounding the wall's most remote sections, perfect hexagons, stretching for miles, invisible from the ground. When the coordinates of these hexagons were plotted, they formed a lattice that matched the structure of crystalline quartz. And when overlaid with global maps, the pattern aligned precisely with major ancient sites: Giza, Teotihuacan, Stonehenge, and the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro. It was as if the Great Wall of China was not just a boundary, but a node part of a global system linking monuments across the Earth in ways that defied coincidence. When Kovacs presented these findings at a private symposium in Budapest, the audience of scholars sat in stunned silence. "We have built machines to measure the planet," he said, "but they built monuments that spoke to it." Back in China, Professor Zhang couldn't shake a feeling she had carried since the day she touched the basalt cylinder, a sense that what they had awakened was watching. Weeks later, when she returned to her office in Xi'an, she found an anonymous envelope waiting on her desk. Inside was a single photograph, a night vision still taken from one of the drones she'd left behind at the site. The image showed the entrance of the sealed chamber, taken days after they had left. A faint light emanated from beneath the stone, not bright, not artificial, but pulsing gently, like the glow of a heartbeat returning to life. When Professor Zhang received that envelope, the one with the night vision photograph, she didn't sleep for 3 nights. She stared at the faint glow captured beneath the sealed chamber, that pale heartbeat of light pulsing under tons of stone, and knew what it meant. The site they had uncovered wasn't just ancient, it was active. Against her university's orders and the government's restrictions, Zhang decided to return. It took months to assemble a small, discreet team trusted colleagues, including Wei Lin and 2 of the engineers from the original expedition. They moved under the guise of conducting geological tests along the Ordos Plateau, far from the eyes of officials. By the time they reached the forbidden section of the Great Wall, the desert winds had already begun to reclaim it. The once visible trench was buried again under drifts of sand, as if nature itself were trying to erase their discovery. When they reopened the entrance, the air that escaped was no longer warm. It was cold, sharp, and strangely metallic, like the scent of ozone after a storm. As they descended, the instruments went haywire again. Magnetic compasses spun in circles, and the static in their headsets rose into a hiss that almost sounded like whispering voices. The chamber hadn't changed, and yet everything felt different. The basalt cylinder at its center now emitted a faint glow, deep blue, like light trapped in ice. The carvings on the pillars pulsed softly in rhythm with that glow. Each beat seemed to vibrate through their bones. When Zhang placed her hand on the nearest pillar, the surface felt alive, warm, even though the air around her was freezing. Then, the humming began again. It was low at first, almost soothing, like the resonance of distant thunder. But within minutes, it intensified, becoming a deep vibration that made their equipment shake. The air grew heavy, and the dust on the floor started to lift, not scatter, but rise straight upward, as if drawn by invisible strings. Wei Lin, the linguist, realized the patterns on the walls had changed again. The shapes were no longer static. Lines had shifted into new configurations, forming what looked like a sequence not random, but structured, like a written message. He whispered that the symbols resembled the oldest form of Proto-Sinitic script, but with variations he couldn't identify. When Zhang compared them to earlier photographs, she noticed something even more disturbing. The changes weren't random. They corresponded to mathematical constants, repeating the same ratios found in planetary orbits. It was as if the chamber itself was calculating. Then, suddenly, the cylinder began to turn. It moved slowly, silently, grinding against the stone floor without friction, rotating as if on an unseen axis. The humming shifted pitch, and a faint beam of light emerged from its top, a column of pale gold rising through the dust like a sunrise underground. The team backed away, shielding their eyes. The light expanded into a sphere that hovered above the chamber, spinning faster and faster until it projected a cascade of images across the walls, patterns, landscapes, stars. It wasn't random imagery, it was a map. Wei Lin gasped as he recognized constellations Orion, Cassiopeia, and others visible only in the northern hemisphere. But there were differences. The stars were positioned slightly off, aligned in ways that would only make sense thousands of years ago. When he overlaid the coordinates in his notebook, the date appeared clear around 10,500 BCE, the same epoch that appears again and again in myths of cataclysm and rebirth across civilizations. The chamber, they realized, was not a tomb or a temple. It was a record. Zhang trembled as she looked around the room. The pillars were no longer just decoration, they were components of some ancient device. Together, they formed a harmonic structure capable of transmitting information through vibration and light. The carvings, once thought to be symbols, were in fact resonant codes, mathematical signatures designed to interact with the frequencies of the Earth itself. But who had built it? Before anyone could speak, the humming shifted again, this time lower, deeper, until it was no longer sound but sensation. The ground quaked softly, and cracks began to spread through the fused stone ceiling. The team scrambled to collect their equipment, but the light from the cylinder had already changed it. Now flickered in rapid bursts, like a pulse searching for a response. Then, just as quickly as it began, everything stopped. The glow vanished. The air fell silent. The chamber was still once more. But beneath that stillness, Zhang felt something, a rhythm, faint but unmistakable, echoing through her feet like a second heartbeat in the earth. She knew then that they had activated something far beyond their comprehension. When the team resurfaced, dawn was breaking. The desert was eerily quiet, and the Great Wall's jagged silhouette stretched endlessly across the horizon. Zhang said nothing. She packed their recordings, sealed the samples, and swore the others to silence. 2 weeks later, a seismic anomaly struck the region. It wasn't an earthquake in the traditional sense. There was no rupture, no damage, just a single pulse recorded by stations across Inner Mongolia and northern China. One clean, symmetrical vibration centered precisely on the coordinates of their dig site. Authorities arrived within hours, confiscating all data and sealing off the entire valley under military jurisdiction. Every record of Zhang's expedition disappeared. The official explanation referred to it as an unstable geological zone, but fragments of her notes survived. In one of them, Written hurriedly in the margins of a field journal, she left a single line: "The wall is not protection, it is containment." In the years since, whispers have continued to circulate among researchers. Some claim to have felt the tremors themselves, faint, rhythmic, and oddly regular, as though something beneath the Great Wall is still alive, waiting. Others say the entire structure, stretching across mountains and deserts, forms a colossal harmonic instrument, designed not to keep enemies out, but to stabilize the planet after a cataclysm long forgotten. Whatever the truth, the discovery changed Zhang forever. She vanished a year later, last seen boarding a train bound for Xi'an, carrying only a single suitcase and a notebook of coded sketches. No one has seen her since. Today, the Great Wall still stands silent, magnificent, and eternal. But those who know the story say it feels different now. They say that sometimes, at night, when the wind sweeps across the towers and the moon strikes the stones at a perfect angle, you can hear it, a low, steady hum rising from the earth, the heartbeat of something ancient that has never truly stopped.